Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving in and building the essential toolkit for anyone working in public service right now. We're going to give you the core skills you need to not just get by, but to actually make a real difference in today's super complex world. So let's just jump right in with the big question, the one that's probably on everyone's mind. How do you serve your country effectively when everything feels like it's constantly changing, the challenges are getting more and more complicated, and the stakes, well, they've never been higher? That's exactly what we're here to unpack. To get a handle on that, we've put together a toolkit with 4 essential pieces. First, we have to decode the machine, how government actually works. Then we'll talk about leading through all this turbulence. After that, we'll get into the crucial work of reconciliation. And finally, we'll pull it all together by mastering inclusive leadership. So, let's get into it. Okay, our first tool is all about understanding the system you're working in. I mean, you can't really change the game if you don't know the rules, right? You need to know who the key players are and how decisions really get made. Okay, think of these 3 agencies as the government's brain. You've got the Privy Council Office, or PCO. They support the Prime Minister and Cabinet, basically setting the whole agenda. Then you have the Department of Finance. They hold the purse strings. They control the budget. And finally, the Treasury Board Secretariat, or TBS. They're the overseers, managing how money is spent and how the whole thing is run. And here's the key takeaway. Any big idea you have has to get through all 3 of them. And this lays out the journey perfectly. It's basically a 3-step process to get anything done. First, you need what's called policy cover. That's just getting cabinet to say, yep, we like this idea. Next, you need the funding. That's when finance goes through your numbers. And finally, you have to get authorities to implement from the Treasury Board. That's the final green light to actually go and do the thing. So it's the idea, the money, and the permission. All right, let's grab our second tool. Now that we know how the machine is supposed to work, how do we operate it when everything feels like it's shaking? This is all about leading through turbulence, and it really comes down to 2 things: your own resiliency and how fluent you are with digital tools. So what do we even mean by turbulence? It's not just about being busy, It's that feeling of constant, fast-paced change where you're not totally sure what's next, and the pressure's really on. Think about a big reorganization or a huge policy shift after an election. Yeah, that's turbulence, and it's pretty much the new normal. And getting through that turbulence requires a completely different digital skill set than before. I mean, it used to be enough to just know how to use email, right? But now, being digitally fluent means you're mastering collaborative platforms, you're always thinking about cybersecurity, and you're making sure everything you build is accessible to every single Canadian. It's not an add-on anymore, it's a core part of the job. So, how do we stay afloat in all this? How do we build that resilience? Well, here are 5 really solid strategies. Things like emotional intelligence and clear communication are obviously key, but I really want to zoom in on the last 2. Connecting what you do every single day back to the bigger why of public service, that can be a total game changer. And seriously, don't ever underestimate the power of having a good support network. Now, our third tool. This one is different. It's not just a skill you learn, it's a deep, fundamental responsibility. Embracing reconciliation is an absolutely non-negotiable foundation if we want to build a public service that is truly fair and just for everyone. To really get why this is so important, we have to start with the truth. This number, 150,000, that's roughly how many Indigenous children were taken from their families, from their communities, and forced into residential schools. This was a system funded by the government designed to erase their culture and their languages. The trauma from that is deep, and it lasts for generations. And this timeline here gives some really important context. The whole system really got going after the Indian Act in 1876. And look at this, the very last school didn't close until 1996. That's not ancient history, that's in the lifetime of many of us. Then, in 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission gave us the 94 calls to action, which is basically the country's roadmap forward. And this quote from Justice Murray Sinclair, the chair of the TRC, it just says everything, doesn't it? He's saying, look, we've done our part. We've laid out the truth, and we've shown you the path. Now, it's up to all of us to actually do the climbing. So what does that climbing actually look like in our day-to-day work? Well, it translates into real, tangible actions. It's things like starting meetings with genuine land acknowledgements. It's about taking the mandatory training on Indigenous history seriously. And it means actively helping to create safe spaces for Indigenous colleagues, like talking circles.
Okay, on to our fourth and final tool, and this is the one that really ties everything else together. Mastering inclusive leadership is how you unlock the amazing potential that sits in your diverse teams. It's how you create a space where everyone, and I mean everyone, can bring their best self to work.
And the biggest barrier to being an inclusive leader is something that every single one of us has: unconscious bias. It's just the mental shortcuts our brain takes that can cause us to make decisions based on stereotypes instead of on facts. And we don't even know we're doing it. So the goal here isn't to be perfect, it's just to be aware. And check this out, because this is where it gets super relatable. Affinity bias, that's why you instantly click with someone who went to the same university as you. Confirmation bias, that's why we tend to only read news that we already agree with. And anchoring bias is why first impressions are so incredibly hard to shake. Just seeing these patterns in ourselves is a huge first step.
So, how do we actually do this? How do we put inclusive leadership into practice? This framework gives us 4 pillars to build on. It starts with a real commitment to understanding different points of view. Then, crucially, you have to create psychological safety, a space where people feel safe enough to speak up and disagree. It's about empowering others, not holding on to power. And finally, it's about accountability for yourself and for your team.
And that really brings us to the most important point. These are not 4 separate tools you just pick up and put down. It's an integrated toolkit. They all work together. An inclusive leader is what builds a resilient team. Those digital skills are what helps that team communicate through turbulent times. And a deep commitment to reconciliation has to inform every single one of your actions. See how it all connects? So we're going to end where we started, but now the question is for you. What you do matters a lot. You are the engine that makes this country run. So looking at this toolkit, decoding the machine, leading through turbulence, embracing reconciliation, and mastering inclusive leadership, which tool are you going to focus on sharpening first?